Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are around the world. I hope you have made it into the chat perfectly okay. You are in the right place. Despite my surrounds, this is a professional workstation and shop. I promise you that. But welcome back to Festival Fridays. It's wonderful to have you back in the room for our 45-minute Friday learning and educational seminars. We kicked these off last year and they went down a real treat, and by popular demand, they are back this year, which is very exciting, covering off a load of topics and trying to fill in the knowledge gaps that global brands around the world have. And we have a fantastic one to start our second series for 2021. If we're in the live space now, that would have been your cue to clap. So I'll do it for you. Yeah. Okay, right. Our second series, and we are going to kick off. We have got a brilliant lineup. One of the things which we are all guilty of, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, during pandemic, is that we rush and we go from one thing to the other as fast as we possibly can, including what we do from a marketing strategy as well. And we don't often give ourselves the time to stand back, think, and go, actually, that could be a really good long-term or medium-term solution. And often it's the brand that gets left behind. Well, this afternoon, you are going to be able to understand how you balance the short and the long term and ensure that your business has a brand which runs completely through the business and not just the marketing and brands team. There's going to be so much insight here, so much information for you to take. I'm obviously expecting you all to be as engaged as you normally are and ask questions. I'm liking someone there has already got in earlier and said they like the t-shirt. Yes, this is my tribute to Chris Whitty. He was abused this week, so I thought, we'll be brand Chris Whitty. So anyway, enough of me, because I'm really not the person with all the insight here. We have two fantastic speakers who I'll try and extrapolate as much information as possible from as we go through. You've got the Q&A function, you've got the chat function if you don't fancy putting it in there, but please ask questions. I'll try and intersperse them as we go through the session. But without further ado, let me introduce you to the two superstars that will take us here. So first up, we've got Jacqui Grimsey-Jones, who is the Global Brand and Communications Director at ClearScore. And rather than give you a bio, as you might have noticed, or perhaps not even noticed, she has the most amazing background. She is the Harry Potter guru of the media industry. Anything you want to know about Harry Potter, she is your lady. Now, alongside Jacqui, we also have a good friend of mine who once called me the Jewish Richard Bacon, which I feel is a compliment, probably after the Blue PT years, which is brilliant. She is also fantastic. It is Emma Harris, who is the chief of Glow London. Now, her best bit about the bio is she's not someone you would like to go out for a drink with on a school night. Not because you're not going to enjoy her company, because that's the problem. You're going to enjoy it too much, and the next day will probably be a write-off. And I'm sure there's a few people tuned in who have gone out of it on a school night, so you know what I'm talking about. But without further ado, please welcome Jacqui and Emma.
Thank you, Jazz.
Yeah, there we go. We've got that on video. That could have been good canned clapping. We didn't have that. So, without further ado, ladies, it's good to have you here for Festival Fridays. Thank you for coming onto our mini stage. I suppose the first question to start with is, what and how do we define brand?
So I'll take that one first. I think ultimately brand is everything that people think or feel about your company. And I think a way to really understand it more is to be able to confidently answer the question, who is your consumer or who is your user? What is their need? And how can you as a business uniquely solve that need? I think when you bring those things together, you really create a brand, and then the brand becomes the glue, if you like, that holds your whole company together. So I know Emma will talk more about brand being everything, but I think absolutely it's everything, but it's also this making sure you've got that combination and understanding of what your user or consumer needs and how you alone can solve that need.
Completely agree. And what she said, plus then once you've worked that out, and that's not easy, it shouldn't take ages or cost the earth, which Jacqui and I both know well, but once you've sussed that out, then for me that's when the real work starts. Because once you get that nugget of actually this is how we're uniquely responding to that need, then you've got to bring it to life. And it's my obsession. I'm always banging on, brand is everything. I find it hard to consider how a business would wake up in the morning and function, because brand is the lens to look through for all decisions, whether it's products, strategy, service, recruitment, retention, behaviors, culture. The wheel around where brand sits in the center is large. Every point in your customer journey, if that's your uniqueness, it should scream very loudly from every point that you touch them. And as you know, Jez, I used to be a client myself. I went to the dark side, but I did used to be a client. I was at Eurostar, and I had great agencies doing wonderful ads. But if you walk into St Pancras and meet someone with a face like a slapped ass, you kind of ruined it. So my energy all went on working on customer services and the culture, as well as advertising. And that, that's our belief, that it doesn't stop at marketing. It has to live in the business.
And that's one of the things which is missed a lot, right? And the pandemic, I feel, has really highlighted that, in the sense that customer service, that piece of everyone in the business knowing what they're doing and where they're aligned to, but also externally when it comes to your clients. And that's something I suppose would be great to tuck into. We're very much obsessed with this kind of performance marketing piece at the moment, which is quite short term. How do what are the kind of foundation and the building blocks in order to be able to create that balance between that performance marketing and that brand marketing, and get that short and long term balance? What do you need in place to make that happen?
I think one of the dangers is considering those things too separately. So I think a lot of companies are structured around having a performance marketing team and a brand marketing team, as though those things don't work together, and as though consumers don't experience your brand marketing and your performance marketing. So I think whether you work in a performance marketing team or a brand marketing team, you need to be thinking about all of the metrics that matter. So looking at brand measures, but also looking at these direct response measures, and really understanding how they interplay with each other. I think, you can read as many pieces of research as you like about the effect of short and long-term marketing, but you need to be able to show how that tangibly works in your own business. So how can you use things like MMM to actually show the impact of long-term on the short term, show what that baseline contribution is, because that's one way that you're going to get stakeholders on board who might very rightly be focused on that short-term delivery because they've got targets to meet, they've got a board to report to, they need to be able to show that short-term impact. But ultimately, if you want to grow the long-term health of the business, you're going to have to spend on brand. But that's something you need to be able to show really tangibly, and something like MMM really helps to do that, as well as having that mentality within your business where performance and brand marketers come together and think about the marketing plan as a cohesive plan, rather than going off and kind of building their plans separately, because that's just not how consumers experience your marketing.
Yeah. And even how it's delivered. We talk a lot about, CRM, and a lot of businesses get very addicted to the numbers. The bigger the net we hook trawl, the bigger the fish will get in. I don't know if that's the right analogy, but actually, if you know who your consumers are, and your brands that polarize consumers, and they're quite happy to say, what, we're not for you, we're for you, and being much more targeted. And particularly those brands that have got that sort of positioning around on side of the customer, people's champion, just sending out mass communication all the time and trying to get that net as wide as possible is working against your brand. So that's, again, I'm banging on about this, brand is the lens. The brand should inform how you do performance marketing, where you are, if that right place, right time, right message. It's got to be led through that lens of brand.
Yeah, and really interesting, you both kind of touched on this, some of the challenges, and we looked at some of the foundations there, but the key challenges, you mentioned, Jacqui, senior management and trying to get them on board. What's the real kind of trick to kind of, I suppose not the trick, the idea or the pitch to get them involved and go, actually, yes, you can deliver this in the short term, this in the medium term, but actually in the long term, combine all three and you get X. What's the, how do you climb that mountain?
I think when you're working with your senior leadership and your senior stakeholders, you've got to start with what you've got in common. So if your business has a mission, a joint vision. Begin with that, because that's always going to be the foundation to anything that you build from. So if you're building a brand strategy, that should be where you start, and that gets everybody already on the same page. And then I think with a senior leadership team, it's about understanding their individual challenges and what matters to them. So, it might be that you talk about brand as having a positive impact on customers in a way that it reduces the number of customer service tickets that you get, and therefore whoever's responsible for customer ops, that's something that really matters to them, and that shows them how brand has an impact on the whole business. Or if you're having a conversation with the CEO or the CFO, showing the impact that you're going to have on the bottom line will also be pretty galvanizing. So I think it's making sure that you really take that first step of getting that joint vision, that joint mission of what you're trying to achieve, and then really understanding the individual challenges of your stakeholders and how brand can help actually improve their areas of responsibility as well. Because as Emma's already said, brand is everything. And I think the more you can remind people of that and show them how it's everything in their areas, the more engaged and bought in they'll be to what you're trying to achieve.
And are you finding that, Emma, because obviously you're dealing with businesses in 3, 4, 5, 6 different businesses who are trying to achieve the same thing, and is there, I suppose, in terms of those challenges, are they very similar? Are there different challenges? What would be your take on how you surmount those challenges?
Yeah, I think that one of the things we differentiate, so our brand, is that we don't stop at the colouring in. So we work really hard with that leadership team because it's got to start with them. So they've got to be living it and breathing it. Because again, if brand is more than just your advertising, if it's your behaviours, your culture, it's your decision making, it's got to start. So we've really struggled actually when we've worked with clients where the leadership team aren't on board, because at some point there will be a disconnect because the brand has to start, it's got to start from the top. And also there's a lot of work to be done in terms of what does this mean for you. So once you nail what that thing is that sets you apart from the guy up the road, making sure everyone personally takes it on board to understand, how do I turn up to work tomorrow knowing I'm delivering on the brand? Because you can be in finance. I always use the guys in finance, but you could be in finance and your job is to manage your debtor days and keep the cash flow going. But again, if your brand is all about being champion the people or whatever, and you are managing your cash flow by not paying people for 90 days or not behaving in a way, you're not delivering on the brand. So everyone has to take 100% responsibility for delivering that brand. It doesn't matter whether you're in advertising or at Eurostar, it was the guys in the depot. Everyone had to live it and breathe it. So it's got to start from the top. And I think businesses struggle where it doesn't.
And also that must be a real challenge as well. Obviously you get the top, and once you get the top of the buy-in, is getting those people who may have been in the business a long time, who aren't at the top but are below and are in different departments, and like, well, I've been doing it this way for 10, 15 years. I'm not sure I should be doing it like that. How do you deal with those people? I mean, that must be an even greater challenge at times. The
naysayers. I suppose.
Yeah.
We'll switch it around, Jackie. I'll answer first. Otherwise, everyone will get bored of our method. But, I think that you have to expect, it's that rule, isn't it? You're going to get 20% who are going to not be necessarily on the bus. Then you've got 60% who will be on the bus. Then you've got 20% who are like driving the bus. So to focus your thoughts just on those 20% is a huge waste of energy, because you're going to be kind of working to lowest common denominator. But focus on that 60% in the middle who might be the people that could go either way. Those naysayers, I suppose it's about, again, getting into, everyone approaches every bit of communication with what's in it for me. So when you're doing that internal change on a brand, it's about helping them recognize how this is going to make their lives better, their jobs better. And at that point, then it's a sort of a choice whether they want to come on the bus or not. But yeah, it's about bringing it to life for them as individuals. So if they do work in finance, making it real for them, not just in the sort of, the wrapping paper of the advertising.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it's also about, how do you get people across all functions to actually build the brand with you? So, when you're doing a brand strategy piece, yes, begin with the vision, have a massively deep understanding of who your user is, but then actually build the output with your team. So bring in commercial, product, marketing, everybody. And then you get way better insights apart from anything else, because you have people who've been there a long time, you have people who've engaged with your users or your consumers across a long period of time who really understand the business incredibly well. But if they've co-built it, they also co-own it, and then they're much more engaged with delivering it and making sure it's successful. And I definitely make sure that you don't just have delivering brand as an OKR, an objective for the brand or the marketing team. They should sit within the other functions as well, because again, then they're invested in delivering that. And I think that's just such a great way to make it feel and actually be something that's delivered through the whole of the business, and you just get such better results from doing it as well. And then just the other piece around people who are maybe offering challenges, I think if you can get all of their challenges out as early as possible in the process as well, that's always really helpful, because then it means you can start to preempt the things that they're going to raise before they even raise them. So I think that's just useful in life in general, but the earlier you can get out those challenges and those disagreements, and then really try and have a policy of disagree and commit, and then once you've made that commitment, it's up to everybody to deliver it, and it's everyone's responsibility.
In any change, completely agree, that process has got to be built from within, because telling someone this is our brand's never going to land. And that change process, so the change, a lot of people have change at different moments and experience change at a different pace. But when we work with businesses on big change, we first of all do a boring bit, actually, which is about education. So rather than going in with the jazz hands of look at our shiny new toy, you do, right, a lot of assumptions are made about where people's heads are at in terms of understanding why change is happening. So you've got to do that boring bit in the middle, what we call the education phase, where you go, this is the market, these are our consumers, this is the opportunity facing us, and if we get it right, this is how we're all gonna benefit from it. This is the world ahead of us. And that kind of boring bit at the beginning is really important. So making people understand why you're changing, how you're changing, and what the result is, to get them engaged with it. Otherwise you're just going out with, another initiative, another thing from marketing, and it will just be whatever.
One of the things I've been doing around, just around that kind of education piece that Emma was just talking about, I think there are amazing ways to bring that to life by showing what other brands have done. So you can actually get such good engagement. I've just done a load of optional lunch and learns, and we've had people across the whole organisation coming along, because actually it can be a really interesting topic. And if you can show how other brands have embedded a strategy and have rolled that out through their whole business, and you can show the finance examples that Emma's talked about to the finance team, then that is actually really exciting and motivating. So I think there's so much great material out there that you can use to get your teams on board with.
And I suppose a question, and someone's brought something up from the audience, which is great, and I was going to go there as well, and I'll come back to this question in a minute from the audience, but just that first piece, the educational piece, the understanding where you want to go, what's that first block you need to have in place to kind of make this go? What's the first block in place? And then I suppose conversely from that, is there such a thing as the first benefit you see from it? When what's the first benefit you're looking to see? How would you kind of, I suppose, Jacqui, from your perspective, and then also Emma from yours, because you're doing it with a whole range of clients?
I think it goes back to what I talked about around having that joint vision in place and the mission of what you're trying to achieve, because actually you can measure whether you're achieving that mission or not in a lot of ways. So if I think about, I'll use the ClearScore example. So our mission is all about helping people achieve greater financial well-being, which essentially means making a genuine improvement to their lives through finances. So we can measure whether we're having that impact or not by looking at what consumers are saying about us. So going and having a look at Trustpilot reviews and seeing if you're genuinely helping people improve their life, and are you helping them rebuild that? And I think that's something that you can then bring back into the organization. So can you get user vox pops? Because tell you what, when you play those and you show how you've changed someone's life, that is incredibly motivating to the team. How do you assess how much the mission means to them? So, you know, we will do a survey within the business to say, is the mission important to you? Do you understand the mission? And I think that's a really good way of saying, actually, is what the brand stands for important to people in the business? Are they achieving it? And then going out and looking at what consumers are saying about you to understand if you're being successful in that.
And you know, and thinking about that first block for some of the clients I've worked with, it's often what's the job of facing us. So where are we? Where do we need to get to? And it's painting that vision. You know, I'm a big believer in NLP and the focus on outcomes. So you go to the end point and you show everyone where you're headed. And it's really different depending on every client. I was just trying to kind of, while you asked that question, map it all together. A big thing that works for a lot of clients is starting off. Brands seem to have this thing where they talk about what they do instead of what they do for the customer. So they'll have a positioning which is about their competitive advantage. So we do this better than everyone else, or we're the best place for this. And actually, I don't think I've ever done a brand workshop, and Jackie will probably agree with me on this, without showing that Maya Angelou quote, which is, people will forget what you did and they'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so a big piece for us right at the beginning is, look, what do we want people to feel? How do we, you know, we all make decisions based on our hearts, not our heads. We make, you know, we all go to this hairdresser that's, no judgment on your hairdresser, but we all go to the hairdresser who's not that great, but we love them. There's a little shop over the road that I go to. I literally don't buy things in Sainsbury's so I can go and see this lovely Turkish family. You know, we make decisions with our hearts. So brands, often that's the start point. It's like, look, we're just talking about what we do. And the risk about what we do is that most of our competitors probably doing the same thing. And if you're using language like best, you know, best, what are you comparing yourself to? Or dare I say it, free? You know, people are very suspicious of free. So there's a lot of, it's about taking people on that journey of, think about the power of getting people to connect with you emotionally and how much loyalty that creates, and making sure, right, if that's what we want to do, that's the emotion we want to create, what are we going to do to create that emotion? And it's about taking them on that journey. I don't know if I just rambled a lot, but
no, it's great. You know, I mean, I've even brushed my hair today, but that's another story. But this journey, the journey that you're talking about, and we know from the start, we talked about how it's a long-term journey. And one of the questions we've had from the audience, which is really good, is how long do we realistically need for a rebrand to bed in?
I always say you've got to give it 2 years. And that, you know, that's not doing the thinking. And it always amazes me. I wrote a piece not long ago that said, you know, I had one client who had worked on their brand for 10 months. I mean, I can't even imagine what that cost. You know, one of our things is just, it doesn't have to cost the earth or take ages to do the thinking, but change happens at different pace in different parts of a business. So I do, you know, I think, depending on the size of a business, but I think really for most big global brands, that journey is probably, you know, a few months doing the thinking, then starting to bring it to life. You know, you've got to take the customers on the journey with you. You've got to catch up product strategy. Those often could be 6-12 month cycles. So I think if you go, right, you know, in 12 months, we're all on the bus, and in 2 years we're there, by which time you've probably got to redo it again, which is great, because that's what keeps us busy. But I think that's realistic. And I think people think they can do it quicker than that. It's probably overly ambitious. Jackie, shoot me down in flames. You think that's mad?
No, I completely agree. And I actually think your point around doing that thinking quite quickly is important as well, because I think otherwise you can drag the process on for a long time. So getting those people involved and actually keeping them quite engaged as well, I think is really important. And then starting to build it out. I think the more you can also just speak that common language. So if there are certain things that are coming out of your brand strategy and certain new turns of phrase, just consistently talking about them, you know, branding your rebrand essentially within your business, because the more you use that kind of consistent language, the more people will start actually talking to themselves in that way. So for example, you know, we've got some personas that we particularly want to focus on, and I've now started hearing people say, well, do you think that's quite the right thing for Clive? Clive is my favourite of our personas. And you know, that he's awesome. So how do you start to use that language, and how do you get people challenging each other on, well, I'm not sure if that quite aligns to this piece of the puzzle that we've all been talking about, or that's not quite you know, as user first as we could be. So I think it's the more you can use that language and essentially brand your rebrand, the more successful you'll be.
Yeah, brilliant. And I mean, look, you know, we're in no doubt that it's a long-term role. How do you, Jacqui, it's a really interesting one for you. How do you, you know, balance up the kind of normal day-to-day marketing things you're doing and brand communication stuff you're doing with this rebrand or the new brand strategy? How you know, how do you kind of balance that time out?
I mean, with difficulties. I think what you can do is think about how you can deliver against the long term in the short term. So, for example, if you've got some theories about your messaging, how can you put that into your short-term work and start A/B testing it and start understanding actually is what we think is going to land working for our consumers? And that's ways that you can actually continue your day-to-day trading, experimentation, test and learning, optimization, but using some of that longer-term thinking and bringing it back into your day-to-day, and just constantly thinking about new ways to test it out, I think will help you to deliver both that short-term and that long term. And I also think it goes back to what we talked about measurement, because it's very easy to deprioritize the long term and just focus on the short term. We all do it, but the more you can demonstrate how it will support the short term, the more you're going to be able to carve back that time for yourself, but also to the business to help them understand why you want to spend that time and effort and carve out that space to work on brand.
Yeah, I think someone asked a question, how do you get the leadership involved? I think that, Jacqui, it's numbers. At the end of the day, you've got to paint the picture. There's no point doing this because it looks pretty or because it's going to make everyone happy. This is about growth. This is about really understanding your customer, about delivering a proposition that uniquely meets that need that they have, and then taking the business forward for it. This is not stuff, you know, stuff that we do for fun. So it's getting the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, Jacqui and Emma, both of you, it's getting that kind of top management on board first, and then working your magic with everyone else, I think is the key thing. I have a question for you, Emma, actually. What are the common mistakes you see when you're going to clients and they say, yeah, we want a brand, this is what we're thinking, or this is why we want to do it? What's the kind of common error that everyone kind of assumes straight away? Is there an assumption, or is there an error? They go, right, we need to redo this first, or we need to do this first, or we need to have that. Because as an industry, you know, particularly when you're in the advertising world, we do have a tendency to go to the new and shiny first, as opposed to kind of some of the more established methods that actually work.
I think for me, it's probably connecting the dots well. So we might get brought in to do a redesign, a rebrand that's about, you know, logos and brand worlds and colours, and actually we're going, but the advertising has to connect, or we, you know, or they've done a sort of a repositioning and now they've got to catch the culture up, but HR aren't involved, or, you know, it's just joining the dots. It's very, you know, I wrote something recently about who owns internal comms, HR marketing, who owns brand is HR marketing, and the answer is everyone. So I think that's the thing. They see it as either a look and feel thing, or an advertising thing, or, you know, or a change in positioning. Somebody asked a question, an effective rebranding. I'll give you an example. Is Greggs for me is like the poster child of repositioning brilliantly, because they were a baker's and they recognized, you know, people weren't going to go to Sainsbury's and not buy bread. They're going to buy their shopping. They're not going to go to Greggs to go and buy the bread separately. So they repositioned themselves against the likes of Pret and Eat as food to go. And they knew their lane. You know, they were all about no quinoa here. They knew exactly how they wanted to make that pivot, and they have absolutely smashed it. Their EBITDA is huge. And, you know, that's a brand that's done rethinking, and it's the thinking you do first, and then how that filters into the way they look after their teams and their supply chain and their product lines. you know, their advertising is brilliant. I remember they did that thing in Phoenix in Oxford Street. There's a Greggs opposite, and everyone was looking at the Christmas window. So they turned their Greggs sign around. When they did the vegan sausage roll, and they did the Mickey take of apple, it's just, you know, beautiful stuff that runs right the way through the business. So that's, I think, where they get it wrong. They, you know, there's too much of a disconnect.
No, it's really interesting, and it's you know, it's all about, like you say, you know, getting that internal piece right, which then gives you that external piece for your customers. And some of the things that Greg's done have been absolutely amazing. And this beautifully kind of leads into another question from the audience, actually. And Jacqui, you touched on this earlier, when, you know, you want to be able to look on Trustpilot and you're getting amazing reviews, right? So someone has asked here, I find that the vast majority of customers tend to speak out or review only when they're unhappy with the service. How do you go about gathering real, tangible customer feedback in order to inform? And are there any tips on platforms or services that you might use externally to do this? I mean, Trustpilot is obviously one.
Yeah, I mean, I would say firstly, if that is the case in terms of customer service, then that is feedback that you should be addressing. So that is part of your brand, that clearly there are some areas of work and building that through your customer service. So it is a valuable tool to understand that and to see where those challenges are. Obviously online reviews, but also getting into some deeper user research as well. So, you know, you can work with user research agencies. There's lots out there, I shan't name any, and you can do interviews, but you need to really understand the questions you're asking as well. So what are you trying to solve for? What insights are you wanting to get out of people? And then just letting people talk, because you just get the most amazing insights from your consumers that you could never come up with yourself. You know, we, for example, asked in a user research group, what does financial well-being mean to you? Because we really wanted to understand whether what we thought was financial well-being actually resonated with people. And, you know, there are people who talk about financial well-being being having enough money to be able to buy food, fill your fridge, and be able to choose what you want to cook for dinner that night instead of only being able to afford the basics. And those are the kind of insights that you're not going to get just by talking within your business, trying to convince each other what users think or consumers think and feel. So I think there is a place for formal research and really understanding your consumers, getting those interviews, getting those deep insights. But I do think that you can find out a huge amount by just going out and reading what they're saying about you in public.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. And the questioner does have a point. It does seem to be people like to review when things are bad, right, as opposed to good, which is always an issue, whatever you're doing consumer facing, I find. There's another question here, and I think this kind of, Emma, is one for you as well, and for you, Jacqui, but it's based on your great review of Greg. Someone has asked, what do you think about the BK, the Burger King, I'm presuming, brand refresh?
I don't, to be honest, I haven't immersed myself in the purpose behind it. I know it's a lot about sort of bringing back that sort of retro brand, which I'm a lover of, sort of bringing back the origins of a brand. I don't know if you remember, Jez, when Spurs did their rebrand, when they took it back to the old sort of 60s shirts, really sort of clean look. As a big Spurs fan, that was a positive one for me. I think, you know, taking it back to the roots of a brand, one of our loves is brands that have sort of slightly lost their way and need to get back to the beauty that they were born with. And I think that's what BK have tried to do, is tried to kind of swim against the tide of the negative perceptions about their food and remind people of their origins. So, it's in that sense, I think the messaging has done that. It's very much focused on the look and feel, though. I wish there would been, for me, when there's a rebrand, we always try and create a reasons to believe that sits behind it, so it's not just a badging exercise. So it's much more about sort of fundamental shift, like Greg's food to go thinking. So it's launching something really symbolic alongside it. And I don't, unless I'm wrong, I don't think BK Burger King have done massive changes other than the look and feel. So it'd be nice to have done something that supports that change.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting, the talk of other brands that are doing good things. Someone, Acacia here, has just said that Fairy Liquid brought back their original packaging, and what you said, Emma and Jackie, that whole emotional ties to bringing back childhood memories, which I think is really good. And you know, that's always a very good thing that you see when brands are kind of re-looking at what they do. But
Yeah.
I suppose one question I have for you is, you talked about it being 2 years, you know, anything less than 2 years for putting a new brand in place. How do you then, after that 2 years, ensure that what you've put in place continues to evolve and remains at the heart of the business? How do you put those steps in place?
It's an ongoing process. You know, your brand every day, because it's that lens, it will continue to inform. And a good brand positioning should last at least 5 years. So the core and the essence of who you are and how you behave, and it just needs to continue, because you need to always continue to evolve alongside the customer changes, market changes. So it's just about staying relevant. And if your positioning is about meeting emotional needs of the customer and you're staying close to what those needs are, they're going to be changing. So you ebb and flow along with them. I couldn't agree more about with everything Jackie said about listening to the customer. Staying close to your customer has to be an obsession for any consumer facing business. I'm sure, Jez, you know, and Jackie, you know, I also am on the exec team of a social media agency. So social listening, there's so much richness that we learn and we feed the big brands that we work with. There's so much raw, because people on social are genuinely, you know, much more, and sorry if anyone hears from research, but it's much less sort of, you know, contrived than putting people in a room and asking them questions, even though there is a lot of value in that. But staying close to the customer and ebbing and flowing along with their needs, but with a staying true to your brand in the center of that. So it never stops, ever.
I think that's the thing, is like, if you've got that consistency, that then allows you to change. So if you've got that core that you stick to with your brand positioning, then you can flex to those needs. I mean, all brands had to do something last year with COVID. Everybody had to be agile, and some brands succeeded in that better than others. And I think the brands that did particularly well were the brands that knew what they stood for, understood what those consumer needs were and how they were changing, and again, how they could uniquely solve those needs. And I think they were the brands who were successful last year.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like we said at the top of this webinar, I think the importance now of having that right brand piece in place is paramount now, particularly in the world we're in. One of the things that the pandemic has certainly brought to our attention, you know, as a consumer, is that whole piece of actually customer service now goes a long way, right? Because a lot of these brands, you have much more time to communicate with them, much more time to immerse yourselves in their products if something's right or something's wrong. So you've always got that. And interested, Emma, you mentioned the social media elements. It's a difficult one, because yes, it provides some amazing nuggets, doesn't it? But also, I suppose it's very raw in most senses as well. So you've got that kind of positive and negative to take from it. And does that social media stance, I suppose, in a way, influence how you're working as well, Jackie? So if, you know, you've implemented part of the brand piece and it's been received not as you wanted it to be received, does that mean as a brand you would then kind of look at that and see how you could bring in the constructiveness from what some of these negative things are saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we were saying earlier, I think you've got to respond to what your consumers are saying about you. Now, as the question that was asked earlier, sometimes there are people who do enjoy being negative in social spaces or on reviews, and sometimes, you know, you will need to take it with a pinch of salt. But at the same time, if there are fundamental challenges with what you're communicating and you're getting that feedback, you have to respond to that. Because if you don't listen to the consumer, then you're not going to be able to be successful. So I think it's combining that kind of feedback loop from social and reviews with other channels as well. You know, if you're doing brand tracking, that kind of research, as well as having those kind of consumer interviews, you can also get some insight from those as well. So tracking some of the brand sentiment measures like trust, you know, those kinds of measures are also important to look at. NPS, actually looking at whether you're getting lots of customer tickets. So if you've got lots of complaints about customer service, it's understanding whether that's a few people who are particularly vocal, or if you've actually got a fundamental problem with your tickets. So I think there's lots of ways that you can combine all of that feedback and understand which bits are the most important ones to act on.
Great. No, absolutely, and I think that's some real good insight there. And we've got another question actually from the audience, which is what brands are currently capturing your attention? Obviously, ClearScore aside, because they're definitely doing that. And who else do you think is kind of up and coming? I suppose from your perspective, Emma, you can give a great overview of ones that are capturing your attention. And Jacqui, you're obviously keeping your eye out on brands that are doing different things so that you can have a look and go, oh, that was a good idea. We could, make that better for us, that kind of thing. So, yeah, what are you seeing? What's the kind of some of the key things that you're seeing?
The only one I can think of right now, and I should have prepped for this question. I mean, there's loads of, I'm a big fan. In fact, they were a client, Eat Big Fish. They were always, if you want to keep your eye on Challenger brands, they've got a website called the Challenger Project. So they're constantly focusing on great up and coming brands. I mean, I just keep hearing everyone talk about Clubhouse. So I know it's not just a brand in itself, it's a platform. And, what is it, a social platform? Is it, it's a new home, it's a new place. Every day, more and more, I'm getting people talking about Clubhouse. And, I think what Clubhouse has done really well is it's captured a moment in time. So where people are, at home, looking for places to go and engage and learn. We're all bored as shit with climbing the walls. We're looking for connectivity because we are really lacking in humans and learning and cocktails. And sorry, I will get overexcited now, but I think Clubhouse is really just put itself right in the heart of that at a time where people are turning away from the likes of Facebook. There's not that much. TikTok sort of came and took the market by storm, but it's really for this particular generation. So I would say one to watch. Is really interesting to see where that goes. It's something I hear everyone talking about.
I should also have probably prepared, but I think one of the brands that always springs to mind, and probably quite an obvious answer, but Brewdog, again, with that kind of disruptive mentality that Emma was talking about, they know exactly who they are and what they stand for, and they can actually be incredibly reactive to what's happening, but that's because they own that space and that territory, and that's what people expect from them. So that's a way that a brand can change and evolve, but because that disruption is consistent, so they have that consistent disruption that allows them to be really on the money with what's happening in the moment and really find that connection and creativity, and it's helped them to really drive fame. But it's also underpinned by having a product that people enjoy, because ultimately they've got to deliver on that as well as being a really great disruptive brand.
Yeah,
thank you. I absolutely agree. The only other one I would add into the mix is we had them speak at festival a couple of years ago. Was Oatly, the milk brand, who are doing some really exciting stuff with their campaigns, which is quite good. Look, we are almost at the end. I mean, you know me, I could ask about another 100 questions, but I feel that it has a nice ring if I ask you both, what piece of advice would you like the audience to take away about building their brand within their business? What key piece of advice would you give them?
I mean, I'm probably bored or stupid with this, but join the dots. It's got to be built from its side. It's got to be based on the truth, not some highfalutin, which is one of Jackie's favorite saying, highfalutin, said something you're creating out of thin air. It's got to be based on the truth, something that it's aspirational, but you can deliver on it. It's got to be built from within so that people that are going to deliver it are, feel like they've had a part of it, and it's got to go right the way through the blood of the business. And, but if you connect all those dots in the right way, it's rocket fuel.
Yes. Have we lost Jacqui?
Put it absolutely perfectly. I'm not sure I can add a huge amount to that. So really starting with the user and their needs, how can you uniquely solve them, and use that brand as the glue that holds the whole company together.
No, fantastic. And I was going to make that the last question, but we have an encore, but only because someone's asked a really interesting question, and it kind of ties beautifully into the start when we talked about Harry Potter and out drinking. Buddy has asked, What do you wish you knew when you were first starting out in the world of advertising or marketing? There we go. It's a nice piece. What would you tell your kind of self now, your younger self?
I think it's that. Sorry, there's an 8-year-old trying to crash me. I'll be done in a few minutes. I knew this would happen. Amazing that they've actually stayed away for this whole time. I do have 4 children in the house. I think it's the need for emotion. I think that took me quite some time. I think as a marketer, you just go straight. You learn about competitive advantage and what we do better. So it's just really staying close to the customer and just that Maya Angelou thing of how do you make people feel. That's what you've got to tap into. And even amazingly, I've got clients or people that, you know, perhaps have nearly been clients who really genuinely believe that their industry, particularly in the tech industry, that function is the thing that's going to make a difference. And I couldn't agree less that it's, you know, function can be stolen by someone else, but emotion can't be.
I mean, I would say the same thing about emotion. I think it's how you also use data to show that emotion is a driver, because I think it goes back to what you're saying, Emma, about how you can use numbers to tell your story and be able to bring in that emotion to the business, but also with that rational logic, because ultimately when you're bringing that brand to life, you are doing a branding exercise, so you need to think about that kind of emotional uplift as well as being able to bring the metrics along.
Right. And someone asked a question.
Well,
who do you want to rebrand as? My answer, I've said this before, W.H. Smith.
Oh,
that was another question. Yeah, who would I love to rebrand?
Yes.
Get a hold of Smith. And if there's anyone here, phone me. But I just, going back to that connection with your childhood and how much of an important brand is, I'd love to help them, you know, get their mojo back.
Wow, W.H. Smiths. Yes, they definitely need it, as most of their shops are still shut in airports, right? So they definitely need a rebrand more than anything else. Just hopefully they're on this call. You never know. But I hope everyone found that really insightful. And believe it or not, that is also, and I hope she doesn't feel embarrassed, that is Jacqui's first time doing something like this. And I thought some of the answers absolutely fantastic. So Jacqui, Harry Potter and his magic definitely helped you there. It was a great pleasure. Thank you very much for staying tuned, everybody, to the first Festival Friday of 2021. But most importantly, thank you very much to Emma and Jacqui. Let's have a virtual round of applause. You can raise your hand here. Look, there you go. I will clap as well. But fantastic. Thank you to the audience. We have our next Festival Fridays are coming along. So the next one will be in a couple of weeks and we'll have further details. This session will be on our YouTube channel very shortly, as in next week. So if anyone in your team wants that, because there was definitely a lot of insightful information there that is crucial to anyone who is thinking of making sure their business has a brand that flows and courses through its veins in the right way. So once again, thank you very much, Emma and Jacqui.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.